let's head over to Genesis chapter 45. Genesis chapter 45. And if we understand the context of where we are at, we understand that we are about to the point where Joseph reveals himself. It has been a long-going portion of history that we've been talking through. We understand in the last chapter that there was a test number 2, and they were all excited after this big old feast. They're going home, taking the food with them, and they're just pumped, and they're on their way. But Joseph has a plan. There was a cup that was put into Benjamin's sack of food, along with all the money that was given back. And then they threw it out. They caught him before they got home and said, listen, whoever has this cup in their sack, they're going to be a servant. And it ends up being, they find it in Benjamin's, and they go back, and then they have to give a defense of themselves. And who was it that stood on behalf of Benjamin? Judah. Was he always like that? Has his character changed? A ton. I just want to remind you that God is not done with you. And despite whatever our past might have been, God is good and can change us and mold us and surprise us. Okay? He can surprise us with what he can do with us. And I was telling my Sunday school class this morning about reminding myself of how I was as a teenager. And thinking of, why does God put me in a junior high teaching that many junior hires and show me what new stuff they can come up with? And then I remind myself of what I was like when I was a teenager and think, oh, maybe that's a little bit of payback. Okay, maybe he's teaching me. But I'm thankful that I'm still not where I was. I'm different because of what God has done, and I'm thankful for that. So as we jump into this, the title is Because God is in Control, and we need this title as we face Tuesday. Okay? Maybe it's just as we face tonight, because something could happen tonight that gets you a little flustered. Maybe you hit the drive-thru on the way home. Has anybody ever messed up on your drive-thru order? I don't think they can blame COVID anymore, can they? Okay. All right. Maybe there's other excuses, but they give you a fish sandwich, maybe when you're allergic to fish, maybe, and then you get frustrated, you get all the way home and think, well, am I going to go back for, the right sandwich? Or maybe you get a flat tire on the way home. How many of you get excited about flat tires? Didn't think so. All right. What if you get home and the dog's made a mess? How do you respond? Oh, praise you, God, for bringing this dog to me. Right? How do you respond? Tomorrow, junior hires, when you show up and they hand you another light mozzarella stick. I didn't know you could have mozzarella light. But it turns out junior hires do not like light mozzarella. And most of them end up being thrown at each other during class. I didn't know that you could have a mozzarella fight, okay? But they did on Friday. It was exciting. One girl had at least 15 mozzarella sticks in her hands, and she starts chucking, and I'm dodging, wondering where the next one's coming. Jackie, don't get them in trouble. It was actually funny. But anyway, I'm not telling any names, okay? But you show up tomorrow, and then all of a sudden, pop quiz. Junior hires, do you love pop quizzes? I know it's your only day that you have to go to school is tomorrow, right? I heard that. Or is that just the high school? You get one day of school. Man, back in my day, we actually had to go to school. I love using that, back in my day. And then you say, well, yeah, back in my day. You're too young for that. But and then Tuesday. What if it doesn't go your way? Now, how many different ways do you think we think it should go within this room right here? Okay? I mean, we probably all have our own opinions, don't we? But you know what? How do we respond to it on Wednesday morning? What about work when they come in and surprise you with a totally different task than what you were hired for? How do we respond? And this is what we get into tonight as far as Joseph and all the things that he's dealt with. It really just comes back to God. And remember when I told you, go ahead and mark. I don't know, if you like marking in your Bible, I like marking in my Bible. I know some of you think that that's blasphemous, but I don't. And so I mark in there that all the things that God is doing and interacting with his people. All the times that he steps in. It is amazing how many times you mark your Bible just in Genesis alone. I mean, if you started in chapter 1, I think every verse would just about have to be underlined, right? You'd have to, it would be a massive amount of ink that would be going out to see how much God actually interacts with his people. And so contextually, this is where we find ourselves, where they are trying to defend themselves. Judah stepped in and is placing himself in for Benjamin, and this is how Joseph jumps in. So we're going to jump into point number 1, forgiveness based on God's sovereignty. Forgiveness based on God's sovereignty. You understand where I'm going once we get through this. So verse number 1, it says, Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, and he cried, Cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. So he got rid of all of the other Egyptians, okay? Everybody except for his brothers. They're all there. Can you think that might get a little intense for the brothers who are trying to defend themselves and say, hey, we want to take Benjamin home with us, okay? We don't want any family issues at home. We don't want our dad to end up passing away due to the fact that he would lose Benjamin, okay? And he's gotten rid of all of these other guys or anybody else that's around. It's only him and his brother. And in verse 2, and he wept aloud. And the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. So this is pretty emotional. This is not a silent weeping. He is overwhelmed with emotion in this moment. And you say, what, guys have emotion? Yes, guys have emotion. And this would have been very emotional. And it was so much that even if because they left the room, they still could hear what was happening with Joseph. Do you think any of them would have been wondering, should we go back in there? What's going on? Why is he doing this? Verse number 3, and Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. How long has he been wanting to say those words? To get that off of his chest. And he says, doth my father yet live? He wants to know the status of his dad. And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. They were absolutely shocked. They were speechless. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom he sold into Egypt. Why would he say it again and then give that extra reference? Who else would know that? Here's proof. Believe me, I am your brother. You sold me. Verse 5, now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. That's another verse that you need to underline. And really the reasoning behind the point that we have here, and many of the points that we go beyond this, now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. Did Joseph have the power to execute his brothers on the spot? To enslave them? To send them to Potiphar's house? To send them to the jail? To see how they would fare? How much power did he have? He had a massive amount of power for one who was sold into slavery by his own brothers. And here he comes in to the point where forgiveness was given not because of who his brothers were, not how cool they were, not how good they were. It was solely based on God himself. God's in control. This is the whole reason for why we have the title to this message. Because God is in control, I forgive you. I let it go. You don't have to be concerned. You don't have to be worried. You can be at peace because I am letting this go based on what God has done, how his plan has been enacted to save your life. Can you think about it, though? I mean, where Joseph's at, he thinks he can think of all that God has done to preserve life. And he can also be at that moment where he says, listen, if I try to negate their lives after God has done so much to preserve them, there could be some scary thoughts going in there, some scary consequences. All that God has done to step in and to save his people, here it is that Joseph lets it go. Verse number 6, for these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in the which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. So we've still got 5 more years to go, brothers. It's still going to be tough. We've still got to trust in God here. Verse 7, and God sent me, another underline, folks, another underline there, and God sent me before you to preserve a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. This isn't anything that's going to be shoved underneath the rug. This is God's glory on display for humanity itself to see of God. To what lengths does God go in order to save his people? Massive. Causing Joseph to go into slavery, causing him to go into prison, causing him all the things that have been done up to this point, and even to use a future enemy of Israel to save Israel. This is all in God's plan. What does this reveal to you? That our God is a great God. That his power, that his all-knowing, that his being everywhere, everything about him just draws us in humility and to worship him because of all of it. Verse number 8, so now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. Did you get that? It wasn't you. Now, everybody would step back at that moment and say, yes, it was us that sold you into slavery. But he understands that God was just using them, using their character, using their faultiness, using their revenge, their bitterness, to get Joseph to the place where he was to save his people. This is all God's plan. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh. Do you get what it's saying there? A father to Pharaoh. What would be a father in this sense? A caretaker, one who watches over, one who guards. What is he doing? He is making sure that Egypt is taken care of and that they are just growing in their power. And you'll see more of it as we go along. And Pharaoh's just handed it all over to him and says, hey, you're in charge. I'm still top dog here, but yet you are caretaker over all of this. And he says, God has made me a father to Pharaoh and a lord of all of his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. This is all that God has done for me, and based on that, I forgive you. How many of us deserve forgiveness? The answer is 0. None of us. It's all based on God. And Joseph has recognized this and said, I will forgive you. I will let this go. Not because of you, but because of God. Are you willing to do that? Another one. Point number 2. Grace based on God's sovereignty. This is intense. He doesn't just stop there. He moves on into verse number 9. He says, Haste ye and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. Don't wait around. Hurry up. Move along. Verse number 10, And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. I'm going to take care of you. Verse 11, And there will I nourish thee. It's not like they're just in survival mode. They will be nourished. They will be well taken care of. It says, For yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. Here's the risk that you're taking over in Canaan. You come underneath my shelter here and my umbrella, you will be taken care of. Verse number 12, And behold, your eyes see in the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. He's still trying to convince them that it's him, that it's Joseph. Verse 13, And ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen. And ye shall haste and bring down my father hither. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck, and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. Verse 15, Moreover, he kissed all his brethren, wept upon them, and after that his brethren talked with him. You say, wow, what a change in circumstances. But despite all that's gone on, he was willing to give forgiveness based on what God has done. But yet also a step beyond there, he's able to take a step beyond what they deserve to go and to give grace as well. He says, listen, I'm going to do one up for you. I want you to go all the way back to Dad. I want you to tell him what's going on. Oh, I'm still alive. I'm flourishing. I can take care of you guys. You go and grab all of your children, your children's children. I mean, every part of your family, all that you have, and I am going to take care of you in the midst of a dry and barren land. In the midst of a famine that's still 5 years down the road. All that you did to me, I'm letting it go, and I'm going a step beyond that to give you grace. You don't deserve it. Come on down. How many of us would be able to take that extra step? To someone who's been so mean, who's done things to us. How many of us would be willing to step out and to give grace? We were talking about the Good Samaritan in Sunday school, and how he had treated this man who would have seen him as a dog. He stepped out and he treated him and put him on his own donkey and carried him where he needed to go and set him up in an inn for 2 months and took care of it. And he says, anything else? Hey, I'm going to take care of it. He doesn't owe that guy anything, and yet he stepped out with compassion for someone who needed it. What about someone who's done something against you? Are you willing to give grace where it's needed? But you don't understand how they vote. You don't understand how annoying their opinions are. You don't know how tough it is to work with them. You don't know how annoying this junior hire is in school. Don't we always offer out all of those excuses to not give grace? And yet, what's the name of our church? Grace Baptist Church. That's not just a name, folks. That's a lifestyle. Giving something that they do not deserve. And this is how Joseph steps out for those who have been mean towards him. Why is it? Because of God. It's because of God. It's plain and simple. You go on to the next one, and this just amazes me as well. You go even farther, and you think of a person who's down and out, and all the craziness that's going on during a famine. And how is a Pharaoh going to respond to this? Joseph's brothers, who sold him into slavery, now Joseph wants them to come around. Maybe I need to step in and convince him that he's a little bit off. He's a little bit crazy in the midst of this decision. You know what he does? All of a sudden you find support that's based on God's sovereignty. He supports Joseph in the midst of this decision that Joseph's made. When he could say, wait a minute, these guys need to pay for what they get. I'm not giving them land. I'm not letting them dwell in Goshen. There's no way. The Egyptians and Egyptians only. That's it. Everybody else has to pay their way. And yet you don't find that here. You find it in verse number 16. And the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house. News traveled faster than in Taylorville Anonymous on Facebook or Speak Out, okay? I mean, it traveled so fast, the Pharaoh has heard about it, saying, Joseph's brethren are come. And it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. They were excited. Verse 17, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, say unto thy brethren, this do ye, lade your beasts, and go get you unto the land of Canaan. And take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt. Hold on for a second. What does it say after that? And ye shall eat the fat of the land. It's not just come and we'll give you a measly portion. Listen, you're Joseph's family. I'm going to give you of the best. You are going to be well taken care of. You're not going to be hurting at all in this famine. Verse number 19, now thou art commanded, this do ye, take you wagons of the good land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. So I'm going to send wagons along with you. You're going to put the kids in, and you're going to come on back. I am going to supply you to come back to Egypt and put more of a burden on Egypt. All of these things that's just been given, all this support, he's just laying it out there. Go ahead, tell them how I'm going to get them here in Egypt. Verse number 20, also regard not your stuff, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. Don't even worry about your stuff back there. Come back, and we're just gonna hand over all this stuff to you. I mean, we are going to lavish you with gifts. Verse 21, and the children of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh, and gave them provision for the way. To all of them he gave each man changes of raiment, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver, and 5 changes of raiment. And 23, and to his father he sent after this manner 10 donkeys laden with the good things of Egypt, and 10 she-donkeys laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. All of this stuff. Why? Did they deserve it? No way. Not one bit. And if they were treated the same way as everybody else, they would have had to pay for all of this stuff. You don't see all these other caravans that are getting all this stuff from Egypt. Why are they getting it? It's because of God's sovereignty. It's because of all of God's control over this entire universe. Are you overwhelmed yet with all of God's goodness? With all that he is? It's not just that, but we jump into the last of the chapter when we find relief. Relief based on God's sovereignty. And this is exactly what Jacob is looking for. You see here in verse 24, so he sent his brethren away, and they departed, and he said unto them, see that ye fall not out by the way. What's he saying? Don't get distracted. Don't get caught up. Don't be arguing with each other. Anybody take road trips where you got a little distracted on the way and it took you a whole lot longer, okay? You took the scenic route. Maybe it's because you read the map wrong. It was upside down, okay? He's saying, hey, don't get caught up. Don't get off the track. Verse 25, and they went up out of Egypt and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive. Now get this, okay? This is not a quick trek. This will take time. This will take days. This will take an extended period of time that Jacob has let all of the brothers, all of his sons, along with his precious Benjamin, to go and to deal with them going where they were and to have their feast and to start on their trek back and getting caught before they even make it back home and going back to Egypt. All of this time that he's been waiting, do you think that he's a little bit worried? Why are they taking so long? What do you think's on his mind? Is Benjamin okay? Is he still alive? What is going on with these guys? I thought that they were going to be back. Where's all this food? And yet, when they come back, they tell him, hey, Joseph's alive. And he's governor over all of the land of Egypt, and Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. And verse 27, and they told him all the words of Joseph which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. Life was put back into it. All of a sudden, something as crazy as Joseph being alive, he's thinking, man, these guys, again, they're letting me down again. And yet all of these wagons show up with all of these goods and all that Benjamin had all by himself. And he looks at all of those and life, relief, peace coming back to Jacob. Verse 28, and Israel said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. Now, for teenagers, this might not make a whole lot of sense of how much relief is coming, but if you've ever been in a situation where you've been away from a family member for so long and then they finally come back home, or you finally get to see that they're okay or whatever it might be, all of a sudden that relief just comes in. I can breathe again. This is where he's at. Why? Because Jacob deserved it? Because the brothers deserved it? Not one bit. It's because of God and his sovereignty. So why do we do what we do? Why do we follow the Word of God? Why do we live by it? Why do we love our enemies? Why are we called to love our neighbor as ourselves? Why are we why are we told to have compassion? Why are we told to go out to those? Do you remember when Isaiah was commissioned by God? He said, listen, you're going to go and preach to all these people, but none of them are going to listen. They're not going to understand it. let's go, guys. Let's get to it. And yet he does. He fulfills what God wants from him, and he obeys what God has stated for him, and he goes and he preaches to a people that don't care about him for quite a deal of his ministry. I mean, you think about all of this. Why? Why? Because the people deserve it? No way. Because I deserve it? No way. Because God is in control and he says to do it. So we do it. We submit because God is in control. We obey because God is in control. We be the good Samaritan because God is in control. Everything that we do, we have peace because God is in control. All of this because of God. Because of God. That's all that it comes down to, is because of him. Because he's the only one that stays true all of the time. The only one. Man, how many of you desire to remain true to every individual that you come by? I mean, you desire to do what's right, and you desire to be able to be depended on, and you desire to show that compassion. Yet, how many times do we fall short? How many of you wake up on Monday morning and you're just like, man, I just want to be a light this week. I want to be compassionate. I want to share the gospel. I want to stop gossiping. I want to stop complaining. I want to stop all of these other things. And yet we come back to where Paul says, hey, I'm doing what I don't want to do, and I'm not doing what I do want to do. We fall short. But why do we get back up again and start doing again what God's called us to do? Because God is in control. Do you feel like America is in a famine right now? And we are still blessed above so many nations across the world. And yet maybe we're just more in a famine spiritually. Apathy gets fed more than spiritual. How do we respond to that? Oh man, can you believe it? Those people out there. Those Americans, can they just get it together? It's true, yeah. And yet, what do we do? What do we need to do? What do we need to do? We need to step up and to do what God's called us to do, and to submit to his will, and to do the best that we can, because God is in control, because we want to reflect Jesus. We want to bear his image. We want to reflect that to anybody and everybody that we come to. Because why? Because God is in control. So no matter what happens tonight as we make our way home, no matter what happens tomorrow morning, because it's Monday and we blame everything bad that goes on Monday because it's Monday, right? Okay? That God is still in control. And when Tuesday happens and whatever happens there, God is in control. So we are going to be the happiest people that wake up on Wednesday morning no matter what happens, right? Get your masking tape ready. Go ahead. Stick it on there in a smile fashion. And you're going to go out in the workplace and you're going to say, because God is still in control, folks. God is still in control. And I'm okay.